Welcome back, friends. I'm really glad you're here tonight. Whether you've been with me for a while or this is your very first time tuning in, thank you for choosing to spend a little of your evening with me. I know there are 1,000 things pulling at your attention. Endless scrolling. Another episode of that show you keep meaning to finish. Or maybe even just the comfort of closing your eyes and letting the day fade away. So if you're here, settling in, getting ready to drift off to one of these strange and cozy tales we spin together, I appreciate it more than you know. If you're new to the channel, here's the rhythm of what we do. Each episode, I tell you one full fantasy history story, sometimes rooted in real events, other times springing out of myth. After the story, we settle into some soothing fire, crackling to help you rest even deeper. It's like sitting by an old hearth while the embers glow. I want you to have something that feels both comforting and just a little magical. Now, something I'd love your help with. I've been experimenting with how long each episode should be. Some of you have said you enjoy long, single stories you can sink into like a soft bed. Others have told me you'd rather have a collection of shorter stories in one episode. I can see both sides, honestly. It's a bit like deciding between a whole novel or a set of fairy tales. So let me know in the comments what you prefer. Do you like one big immersive tale, or 2 or 3 shorter ones bundled together? Your feedback really shapes how I keep building these, and it's been amazing to see what you all come up with. And tonight's story, it's a big one. We're traveling to the heart of the Aztec Empire, to the mighty city of Tenochtitlan, at the height of its power. Our story is called When the Aztecs Opened a Door to the Sun God. It's about ambition, devotion, sacrifice, and the thin line between worship and destruction. At the center is a warrior named Cuauhtli, whose name means eagle. He's brave, devoted to his people, and yet fated to carry a burden no one could envy. When the Aztecs sought to draw closer to their god of the sun, Cuauhtli, they opened a doorway that perhaps was never meant to be touched by mortal hands. Through that opening poured not just light, but fire, and a choice so heavy that Cuauhtli himself would become its vessel. It's a story of great battles, divine presence, and a single man's sacrifice that altered the fate of an empire. And, since this is our corner of the internet where history and myth blend freely, it's told the way I like best, as though it really happened, hidden between the lines of dusty chronicles waiting to be rediscovered. So, if you're comfortable, settle in, let the day fall away, and let's begin. The night before the Festival of the Sun, Tenochtitlan pulsed with anticipation. Torches lined the streets, their flames mirrored in the waters of the great lake surrounding the city. Drums echoed in deep, steady rhythms, each beat carrying across canals and stone causeways. The city was alive, its people preparing to honor Cuauhtli, the great sun god, the giver of victory and the burning force of the sky. At the center of it all stood the Templo Mayor, the great pyramid rising like a mountain in the heart of the city. Its twin temples crowned the top, one for Tlaloc, god of rain, and the other for the sun, God himself. It was here that the empire's greatest ritual would unfold, one that the priests whispered would bring the people closer to the gods than ever before. Cuauhtli stood at the temple's base, armored in feathers and obsidian, his spear in hand. He was no ordinary warrior. Among the eagle warriors, he was renowned for his courage, having captured more foes in battle than men twice his age. His people adored him, his emperor trusted him, and his name had become a song sung in marketplaces. Yet tonight, he carried a weight that even his strong shoulders threatened to buckle under. For weeks now, he had been summoned by the high priest, Cuauhtli, to hear whispers of the coming ritual. Not a mere offering of hearts, not a war sacrifice, as the empire had done for centuries, but something far greater. A doorway, the priest had said, between the world of men and the blazing throne of the sun. Through that door, the god himself might speak, might bless, might grant the Aztecs a power eternal. But a doorway always opens both ways, and Cuauhtli, though no scholar, knew enough to feel the danger in that. As the drums boomed louder, he looked up at the pyramid's summit and saw the altar being prepared. Golden bowls, filled with obsidian knives, gleamed in the torchlight. Incense curled into the night sky like ghostly serpents. The people below were joyous, dancing, feasting, painting their faces in red and yellow. But Cuautli's chest was heavy. He had seen battlefields turn to ash beneath the sun, had felt the merciless blaze of midday that withered crops and cracked the earth. To draw closer to that fire, what if it was too much for mortals to bear? And yet, when his emperor Moctezuma the Elder laid a hand on his shoulder and said, "Cuauhtli, you will stand guard at the opening of the sun," he bowed and accepted. He was a warrior. His life belonged to his people. That night, as he prepared, Cuauhtli dreamed. He stood not in Tenochtitlan, but in a desert of burning light. The sky was aflame, the earth molten beneath his feet. A voice deep and searing spoke his name. "Eagle, will you burn for me?" He woke with sweat running down his skin, his heart pounding like the drums outside. Dawn broke, and the city's heart beat louder than ever. The people of Tenochtitlan filled the plaza around the Templo Mayor, their voices rising in chants that wove together like a single living river. The lake shimmered in the first rays of the sun, and the towers of the city gleamed like they were wrapped in gold leaf. Today was no ordinary festival. Today, they would invite the sun itself to descend. Cuauhtli ascended the steep steps of the pyramid, each stride deliberate, each breath measured. Behind him, other eagle and jaguar warriors followed, their armor flashing with the colors of flame and earth. To the people below, they looked like living embodiments of the gods themselves. To Cuauhtli, they were his brothers, men who trusted him with their lives, and men who, like him, had no idea what awaited them at the summit. At the altar, the high priest Xocoyotl stood in ceremonial robes of deep crimson, his chest painted with streaks of black ash. His eyes were rimmed with yellow pigment, giving him the appearance of one who stared directly into the sun without blinking. In his hands he carried the Codex of Fire, a scroll said to be older than the empire itself. It was written, he claimed, by the first priests who had glimpsed the god's fire and lived to tell of it. Brothers and sisters of the fifth sun. Xocoyotl's voice carried like thunder down the steps, magnified by the stone and the silence of thousands. For centuries, we have offered the blood of our enemies, the hearts of warriors, the cries of captives. Today, we offer not only blood, but courage. Today we open the way. The crowd roared, drums pounding in a frenzy. Incense rose in thick clouds, sweet and choking, filling Cuautli's lungs with smoke and spice. He could feel the air shimmer around him, as though the world itself had grown thinner, less stable. Xocoyotl turned to Cuauhtli. His eyes seemed to blaze with an inner fire. "Eagle," he said softly, though the words struck Cuauhtli like a hammer. "You are chosen. You will guard the threshold, guard it, or cross it, Cuauhtli wanted to ask, but the words stuck in his throat. He bowed his head instead, and his silence sealed his fate. The ritual began. The drums slowed to a heartbeat rhythm. Dancers in feathered costumes spun in wide circles, their shadows flickering like flames against the temple walls. Priests drew obsidian blades across their own arms, letting drops of blood fall into golden bowls. Cuauhtli raised his hands and began to chant, words so old that even Cuauhtli, who had grown up hearing every hymn to the gods, could not recognize them. The air thickened, the sunlight above grew harsher, brighter, until it felt like noonday, though the morning had barely begun. The plaza fell into silence, the people staring upward, mouths open, eyes wide, and then light tore the sky. Not sunlight, not exactly. It was too concentrated, too violent, a spear of brilliance that stabbed down into the very heart of the pyramid. It struck the altar, and in its place a doorway opened, a rectangle of burning gold. On the other side was no temple, no sky, but a roiling ocean of flame. Shapes moved within it, immense, blazing, indistinguishable from the fire around them. The people screamed, though whether in awe or terror, Cuauhtli could not tell. The warriors shifted uneasily, gripping their weapons as though they might defend themselves from the sun itself. Cuauhtli's heart pounded. He could feel the light pulling at him, tugging at his bones, his blood, and in that moment he knew the god had chosen him not to guard the door, but to hold it, to be its vessel. The priest's voice rang out, sharp and triumphant. The sun has opened. Let us give it what it demands. And then the sacrifice began. Captives, warriors taken in battle, were dragged forward. Their hearts were lifted to the burning doorway, their blood spilling into the golden light. With each offering, the flame pulsed brighter, the shapes within the fire growing clearer. One looked almost like a man, another like a great bird, and another like a serpent coiled in eternal blaze. Cuauhtli staggered, sweat pouring down his face. His vision blurred, and for a moment he thought he saw feathers sprouting from his arms, wings burning with fire. He heard the voice again, the same voice from his dream. Eagle, you are mine. And then the battle began. The first to resist were not enemies from outside, but the jaguar warriors beside him. One, eyes wide with terror, screamed, "It is not a blessing, it is death." He lunged toward the priest, blade raised. Another followed, trying to push the golden bowls from the altar. The doorway flared. Light burst out like a wave, searing flesh, burning feathers to ash. Men screamed, rolling on the ground as fire clung to them like living creatures. The crowd below broke into chaos, some fleeing, others falling to their knees in prayer. And Cuauhtli stood at the edge, staring into the flame, feeling it call him forward. The golden doorway pulsed like a living heart, every beat sending ripples of fire across the temple summit. The jaguar warriors, who had turned against the priest, lay smoking on the stone, their armor fused to their flesh. The air smelled of scorched feathers, burnt blood, and incense so thick it was choking. Cuauhtli's hand gripped his macahuitl so tightly the obsidian blades cut his palm, but he hardly felt it. His gaze was locked on the fire. He could see the figures more clearly now, beings of impossible size and majesty, their bodies woven of sunlight and flame. They shifted and writhed like the surface of the sun itself, their voices a deep hum that vibrated in his chest. The high priest Cuauhtli raised his arms, his crimson robes glowing in the firelight. The god is here. The fifth sun accepts us. His voice was exultant, crazed. Give more. Give all. Warriors obeyed, dragging new sacrifices forward. Men, women, even children. The golden bowls overflowed, blood streaming down the steps of the Templo Mayor in rivulets that smoked when they touched the light. Cuautli's heart twisted. This was not honor. This was not balance. This was madness. A voice sharp as obsidian cut through the roar of drums and screams. Enough! It was Atlacoya, captain of the Jaguar warriors, her jaguar pelt smeared with soot, her obsidian club dripping red. She pushed through the priests and shoved one aside, standing defiantly before the burning doorway. This is no God's blessing. This is a prison breaking loose. The priest shrieked, calling her a blasphemer. Xocoyotl pointed at her with a trembling hand. Seize her. Feed her to the light. But before anyone could move, the doorway pulsed again, and a wave of fire surged outward. Warriors were lifted off their feet and hurled screaming into the crowd below. The steps ran slick with blood as the flame consumed sacrifices and faithful alike. Cuauhtli staggered, barely holding his ground. In that burst of fire, he saw something he could not unsee. The shapes within the light were not gods at all. They were prisoners, chained in an endless storm of fire, struggling to break free. The scrolls, the codices whispered of such things. Beings older than the fifth sun, older than the world itself, imprisoned when the earth was new, sealed behind doors of flame. Not gods, monsters. And now, through the arrogance of men, the door had opened. Cuautli's blood went cold. The voice that whispered to him in his dreams was not Tonatiuh, not the sun god. It was one of these beings, reaching through cracks in its prison. It had chosen him not to bless, but to bind. Atlacoya's voice reached him through the roar. Eagle! You feel it, don't you? This is wrong. If they come through, the fifth sun will burn away, and there will be nothing left. Cuauhtli nodded once. His heart pounded like war drums. He had always fought for the empire, for the balance of the gods. Now, for the first time, he would fight against his own people, because what they summoned was death itself. The battle for the temple erupted. Atlacoya's jaguar warriors turned on the priests, cutting them down before they could finish their chants. The faithful swarmed up the steps, hurling stones and spears, desperate to protect the doorway. Cuauhtli charged into the fray, his obsidian blades cleaving through gold-painted shields, his war cry split in the air. The temple summit became a slaughterhouse, blood soaking the stone until it was slick beneath their sandals. Through it all, the doorway pulsed brighter, widening with every drop of blood spilled. A claw of fire thrust through, huge and writhing, searing a trail across the stone. Men screamed as it burned through their armor like paper. Cuautli's vision blurred again, and he felt the pull, stronger now, irresistible. The flame wanted him. No, not wanted, needed him. The prison could only open fully if a vessel gave themselves to it, a vessel strong enough to contain its fire, and Cuauhtli was that vessel. He turned to Atlacoya, his chest heaving, eyes blazing with both fear and resolve. If I step into the flame, I can hold it back. Not forever, but long enough to save the city. Her face twisted with grief. It will consume you. I know. The battle raged around them, but for a moment time slowed. The sun beat down, merciless and blinding. The doorway widened, the prisoners of fire pressing against the crack like wolves at a gate. Cuauhtli gripped his weapon, then let it fall to the blood-slick stone. Tell them, he said softly. "Tell them I became the sun's shadow." And without waiting for a reply, he stepped into the fire. The world vanished in light. The fire swallowed Cuauhtli whole. For a heartbeat, there was only pain, searing, absolute, 1,000 obsidian knives driven into every vein and muscle at once. His skin blistered, split, and yet he did not die. The flame wanted him alive. He felt his body stretch and twist, his blood boiling, his bones glowing like molten metal beneath his flesh. Voices crashed into his mind, the howls of the beings imprisoned in the sun, roaring their rage and hunger. They clawed at him, tearing at his thoughts, each one trying to take him as their vessel. But Cuauhtli was no ordinary man. He was eagle of the temple guard, raised on battlefields, fed on duty, hardened by loss. He held his ground within the inferno, as though standing in the shield wall against an endless tide. "No," he growled, his voice echoing like thunder in a canyon. "You will not break me. If I am your vessel, then I choose how the fire burns." The flames coiled tighter around him, forging themselves into his body. His eyes became molten gold. His hair ignited, streaming like a banner of fire. His chest bore the mark of Tonatiuh, but warped, darker, half sun, half shadow. He was neither man nor god, but something between. On the temple steps, the battle faltered as every warrior turned to look. Even the priests stopped chanting. Cuauhtli stood at the heart of the fire, transformed, radiating heat that scorched the stone beneath his feet. Atlacoya stared, both awestruck and horrified. "Eagle," she whispered. Then the roar came, a sound that shook Tenochtitlan itself. The door widened, and the first of the imprisoned tried to force its way through. A titan of flame with horns like curling suns, its eyes pits of endless fire. It reached forward, clawing toward the city. Cuauhtli's new body moved instinctively. He thrust his arms outward, and walls of fire erupted, not to free the being, but to push it back. The titan bellowed, its voice cracking the sky, but the door slammed shut a fraction, sparks scattering like meteors. Gasps rose from both priests and warriors. Some dropped their weapons, believing they were seeing a god born. Others screamed in terror, calling him a demon. Cuauhtli staggered, the strain immense. The fire inside him wanted to consume everything. His veins burned like rivers of molten stone, his heart hammering like a drum made of lightning. But he held, teeth gritted, sweat and fire streaming from his face. Behind him, Xocoyotl the high priest shrieked, pointing his dagger. "He steals the god's glory. He is no vessel, he is corruption. Strike him down." Fanatics surged forward, their obsidian blades raised. Atlacoya roared and met them head on, her jaguar warriors cutting through the priests before they could touch Cuauhtli. "No one touches him," she cried. "He is the shield of the fifth sun." The summit became a storm of violence. Priests and fanatics clashing with jaguar warriors, blood painting the temple steps black. All the while, the doorway pulsed, each heartbeat threatening to burst wide. Cuauhtli sank to one knee, his body trembling with the effort of holding back the imprisoned titans. The voice of one of them, deep, cold, patient, slid into his mind like smoke. "You cannot hold us forever, mortal. You are flesh, and flesh burns. But open yourself fully, and you will not die. You will live as we live, eternal, boundless." Cuauhtli clenched his fists, fighting the whisper. "If eternity means you unleashed upon the world, then I choose death." The titan howled, slamming against the seal. The ground shook, cracks splitting across the temple platform. Below, The people of the city screamed and fled as stone blocks tumbled from the heights. Atlacoya, bloodied but unbroken, fell to her knees beside Cuauhtli. Her eyes blazed with tears. "You cannot do this alone." Cuauhtli's burning gaze met hers. "Then help me. Anchor me to this world. Remind me what I fight for." She clasped his arm, ignoring the searing heat that scorched her flesh. "You fight for the fifth sun. For balance. For us." Her words steadied him. The fire within surged, but now he had a chain to hold it with. With a roar that shook the heavens, Cuauhtli thrust both hands forward. A torrent of fire erupted, not wild, but shaped. Spears of golden flame that pierced the Titan and drove it back screaming into the abyss. The door shrieked shut another fraction, the chains of the prison reforging with every heartbeat. The battle was far from over. More Titans pressed against the barrier, their shadows writhing in the fire. Cuauhtli's body burned with every breath, his strength draining like water through his fingers. He knew the truth. He could not hold them forever, but he could buy time. Enough time to save the city. Enough time to leave a legend. The night split open with a crack like the sky itself, tearing apart. For a breathless moment, silence held. Then came the roar, so vast, so heavy, it rattled bones and crumbled plaster from walls across Tenochtitlan. The door, weakened though Cuauhtli fought to hold it, burst wide enough for one Titan to push through. His body was made of flame and obsidian, towering above the temple, its limbs like molten rivers encased in black rock. Its face was a mask of fire, shifting between snarls, screams, and the weeping of forgotten souls. The city panicked. From the canals to the causeways, people screamed and fled. Torches toppled, homes caught fire, and drums of warning pounded across the valley. "A god walks among us," some cried. Others whispered, "The end of the fifth sun." Cuauhtli staggered to his feet, his fiery form blazing brighter with every heartbeat. The Titan's presence pulled at him, as though the creature were a mirror of what he might become if he surrendered to the fire inside. His chest heaved, the mark of Tonatiuh glowing brighter, threatening to consume him from within. Atlacoya fought nearby, cutting down priests and fanatics who still raved about sacrifice, their voices raw with fanaticism. She turned to see the Titan descend the temple steps, each footstep melting stone, and her heart faltered. "Cuauhtli," she whispered, almost a prayer. He answered by leaping forward, his body trailing fire like a comet. The impact of his strike shook the temple, flames meeting flames as he grappled with the Titan. Their clash lit the night, brighter than the moon, sparks raining like falling stars. The Titan's voice boomed, echoing across the valley. "You cannot cage the sun, little spark. You are one of us. You belong to the fire." "No," Cuauhtli roared, forcing the beast back with a torrent of golden flame. "I belong to my people." The Titan laughed, its voice a furnace. It clawed at him, raking through his flesh of fire and blood. Cuauhtli staggered, but held, driving his fist, blazing like molten iron, into the monster's chest. The Titan howled, the wound sealing instantly with more fire. Atlacoya charged up the steps to his side, her jaguar warriors rallying behind her despite the impossible odds. They hurled obsidian spears and arrows, which melted before striking true, but their cries gave Cuauhtli strength. They would not abandon him, even in the face of gods. The Titan's arms swept out, crushing a dozen men in a single blow, their screams snuffed out in fire. The survivors wavered, terror pulling at their courage, but Atlacoya roared, her jaguar mask drenched in blood. "Stand!" For the fifth sun. Cuauhtli knew what he had to do. The Titan was too strong to destroy while the door still stood open. The only way was to close it entirely, sealing the Titan back inside. But to do that, someone had to become the lock. His body trembled, cracks of fire splitting his skin like shattered pottery. He felt his humanity slipping with every heartbeat, his soul stretched thin between man and God. His gaze found Atlacoya through the flames. Her eyes met his, filled with defiance, grief, and something deeper, something unspoken. "Forgive me," he murmured. Before she could answer, Cuauhtli leapt high, his body blazing like a second sun. He crashed into the Titan, wrapping it in his burning arms, his fire merging with its own. The monster howled in triumph, believing it had consumed him. But Cuauhtli's voice rose above it, a roar not of rage but of sacrifice. "With my blood I bind the door. With my soul I seal the fire. The fifth sun shall endure." The flames erupted in a blinding pillar of gold and red, so bright the city below fell silent. Every eye turned upward. For a single instant, it seemed the sun itself had descended to earth. The Titan thrashed, its form breaking apart under the weight of Cuauhtli's will. Atlacoya screamed his name, but her voice was lost in the inferno. She could only watch as Cuauhtli's body dissolved into the flames, his spirit fusing with the chains that bound the door. The Titan howled one final time before being dragged back into the abyss. Then, silence. The fire winked out. The night returned. The door stood sealed. The temple blackened, but whole. The city trembled in the aftermath, its people whispering prayers, its warriors kneeling where they stood. On the scorched platform, Atlacoya staggered forward, her blade dropping from her hand. She fell to her knees, pressing her palms to the blackened stone where Cuauhtli had stood. The mark of Tonatiuh still glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Tears streaked her face. "You became the sun," she whispered, "and we will never forget." The people would remember that night not as the end of the world, but as its salvation. Cuauhtli's name would pass into legend, whispered as the warrior who became the shield of the fifth sun, the man who burned so the world could endure. Atlacoya screamed his name, but her voice was lost in the inferno. She could only watch as Cuauhtli's body dissolved into the flames, his spirit fusing with the chains that bound the door. The Titan howled one final time before being dragged back into the abyss. Then, silence. The fire winked out. The night returned. The door stood sealed. The temple blackened, but whole. The city trembled in the aftermath, its people whispering prayers, its warriors kneeling where they stood. On the scorched platform, Atlacoya staggered forward, her blade dropping from her hand. She fell to her knees, pressing her palms to the blackened stone where Cuauhtli had stood. The mark of Tonatiuh still glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Tears streaked her face. "You became the sun," she whispered, "and we will never forget." The people would remember that night not as the end of the world, but as its salvation. Cuauhtli's name would pass into legend, whispered as the warrior who became the shield of the fifth sun, the man who burned so the world could endure. The chant began low, then grew. Cuauhtli, 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 until the temple stones seemed to shake with it. The priests paled, their power was slipping, their lies unraveling. They could not silence an entire city. Atlacoya raised her hand, and the voices hushed. She stood before the people, her shadow long in the torchlight. "Then we will remember him as he deserves. not as a victim, not as a blasphemy, but as a hero, a shield, a son of flesh who chose us over the gods. She took a charred fragment of the temple stone and pressed it to her chest. I swear it, his name will not fade. In the days that followed, the priests scrambled to rewrite the story. They spoke of Tonatiuh's vessel and divine fire, but the people whispered another tale in the markets, in the canals, in the quiet of their homes. Children played at being Cuauhtli, leaping into imaginary flames. Mothers soothed their babies with his name, and Atlacoya carved his memory into stone, painting his likeness on the walls of her house, telling and retelling the night's events until it became something more than memory, something like prophecy. She knew the priest would try to bury him in silence, but she would not let them, for she had seen his eyes in the final blaze. She had heard his last vow, and though the fire was gone, she felt his warmth still, lingering in her heart. The fifth son endured, but it was not the gods who had preserved it. It was a man who burned bright enough to outshine them all. Weeks passed, and the city rebuilt itself. The scorched temple stones were scrubbed clean. New offerings piled upon the altars, and festivals resumed in honor of Tonatiuh, as though nothing had changed. The priests chanted louder than ever, their words sharp, their ceremonies grander, each act a desperate attempt to drown out the whispers that grew day by day. But whispers are like rivers. Once they begin, they carve paths no wall can stop. In the markets, a woman selling maize husks told her customers it was Cuauhtli's fire that fed the sun, not theirs. Her words spread with the coins exchanged in her palm. In the canals, boatmen sang songs of a warrior who burned brighter than dawn itself. Children played games where one pretended to be the priest and the others pretended to be Cuauhtli, always choosing to leap into the flame rather than bow. The priest tried to stamp it out. They declared that anyone who invoked Cuauhtli's name in ritual would be cursed. They burned his likeness where it appeared on walls. They even claimed to have received dreams from Tonatiuh himself, condemning the memory of the man. But still, his legend grew, and Atlacoya nurtured it like a flame in the wind. She told a story wherever she could, sometimes in the open, sometimes in hushed gatherings when she knew the priest's spies were near. She added details that made the tale glow brighter. The moment Cuauhtli looked into the door of the sun and did not flinch, the way the fire bent around him as though he commanded it, the sound of his final vow echoing like thunder. Soon merchants traveling between cities carried his story. Tlaxcalan traders whispered of him around campfires, calling him the man who outshone the gods. By the time they reached distant markets, Cuauhtli was already becoming more than a man. He was a symbol. Some feared this symbol. The priests, cornered and bitter, muttered of rebellion, of dangerous heresies. They warned the rulers that Cuauhtli's name could undermine faith itself. And perhaps they were right. For every time a child chose to play Cuauhtli instead of Tonatiuh, every time a mother lit a candle in his name, the priests felt their power slip further away. Yet even they could not stop the tide. One night, Atlacoya dreamt she stood again in the temple, staring into the rift of fire. But this time, Cuauhtli stepped back out, not as the man she had known, but as a being of living flame. His voice was both his own and the roar of the sun. "Tell them I'm not gone," he said. "Tell them I burn in every dawn. Tell them that the gods are not the only ones who may guard the fifth son." She woke, trembling, the embers of his words alive in her chest. And when she told the dream to the people, they believed. From that night forward, Cuauhtli was not just a hero, he was prophecy, a reminder that mortals could rise to meet the gods, that fire could belong to men as much as to the heavens. And deep within the temples, the priests quaked, for they knew such belief was more dangerous than any foreign sword. Seasons turned, and the scars of the fire faded from the temple stones. The city carried on, as cities always do, but beneath its heartbeat lived a new rhythm, a quiet faith, not in priests or gods, but in the memory of a single warrior. Atlacoya grew older, her jaguar mask long since set aside, her hair streaked with silver. Yet whenever children asked her about the fire that once split the temple, her eyes would glow with the same fierce light. She would tell them of Cuauhtli, the boy who became a warrior, the warrior who became a vessel, the vessel who became a sun. And though the empire would face storms to come, foreign steel and endless trials, the story of Cuauhtli remained an ember that could not be extinguished. Merchants carried it to distant lands, where strangers marveled at the tale of a man who had chosen to burn brighter than the gods themselves. At dawn, when the first light spilled across the city, people lifted their faces to the sky and whispered his name, not in fear, not in sorrow, but in gratitude. For the sun rose each day, and with it, the memory of Cuauhtli rose too. Atlacoya stood often at the temple steps, watching the horizon blaze. She would smile and whisper softly, "You are still with us." And in that warmth, in that glow that touched every stone, every canal, every beating heart, she felt his presence. The fifth sun endured, and so did Cuauhtli, not as a god above, but as a guardian within, his fire carried by the people he loved, his sacrifice lighting the path of generations. And perhaps that was the truest victory, not that he had sealed the door to the gods, but that he had opened a door within every mortal soul, showing them they too could burn with the light of the sun